Imagine pouring like $50 million into a massive software launch. You hit every single deadline, right? You stay 10% under budget.
Sounds like a dream scenario, honestly.
Right. Your team works weekends to get the code perfectly polished, and then on launch day, you realize you built a product that absolutely no one wants.
Yeah, the classic nightmare. And it happens all the time.
It really does. It happens every single day in the corporate world. But, why? Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to distill a massive stack of research, guides, and source materials on project management fundamentals into, well, actionable, mind-expanding insights.
Exactly. We're getting past the surface level today.
Yeah, because whether you are managing a massive corporate initiative, organizing a community event, or just trying to navigate a chaotic week, you are a project manager. You're dealing with moving parts.
Unlimited time.
Yes, limited time and the wildly unpredictable nature of other human beings. Our goal today is to move beyond the jargon and uncover the hidden mechanics of how work actually gets done.
Okay, let's unpack this because a lot of us just assume project management is, I don't know, about making really aesthetically pleasing to-do lists.
Yeah, that is a very common and honestly a very dangerous misconception. The true secret to project management isn't just about making lists. It's about understanding the intricate web of strategy, people, and risk.
A web of strategy and risk. Okay, before we can manage a project, we have to understand the universe it lives in, right?
Right, because projects don't just happen in a vacuum.
Exactly. They are part of a larger organizational machine. And the source material breaks this down into a specific hierarchy. You've got portfolios, programs, and projects.
And operations, yeah.
Right, and operations. So can you define this hierarchy for us?
Sure. So think of this hierarchy as the central nervous system of an organization's vision. At the very top, you have the portfolio.
Okay, the portfolio. Yeah, which is highly strategic. A portfolio is looking strictly at long-term, big-picture goals, like expanding market share or increasing profitability.
So it's the really high-level stuff.
Exactly. Then, nested beneath that, you have programs. A program is a group of related projects managed in a coordinated way.
Why group them, though? Why not just manage them individually?
Because grouping them gets you benefits and control that you simply couldn't get if you managed them separately. Programs are usually long-running. And beneath those programs, we finally hit the projects themselves.
And projects are different, right?
Totally different. A project is temporary. It's a temporary endeavor to create a unique deliverable. It has a clear beginning and a hard end date.
Got it.
And the sources provide a really specific quote about how these levels help each other, actually.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
A program manager helps, quote, by removing the barriers in front of the projects. And a portfolio manager helps, quote, by providing the right resources at the right time.
Oh, I love that. They clear the road and fund the trip. Think of it like a restaurant empire, right?
Okay, let's hear it.
So the portfolio is the parent company deciding to expand. The program is the launch of like a new restaurant location in a new city. And the project is designing the menu for that specific location. It has a clear end date.
That framing works perfectly.
And what about operations? That would be the kitchen cooking those meals every single night, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Operations are ongoing, repetitive, and efficiency-focused. It's low risk.
But confusing projects with operations is a classic trap.
How so?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, recognizing the temporary nature of a project is actually what creates the urgency to finish it.
Oh, because it has to end.
Right. Projects are temporary and high risk. If you treat a project like daily operations, you lose that urgency and it just bleeds resources forever.
The zombie project. So now that we know what a project is, how do we get the authority to actually do it?
Yeah.
Because that naturally leads to the rules of engagement, right?
Yes, the foundational documents, specifically the Integrated Project Charter. Right, the charter. Now, I always pictured a charter as just like a bureaucratic piece of paper you sign at a kickoff meeting and then just shove in a drawer.
And that is precisely how poorly run organizations treat it. It's a massive mistake. The charter is not just a piece of paper.
What does it actually do then?
It defines the scope, the dependencies, and it gives the project manager actual authority to spend money and use resources. And it requires a senior leader sponsor.
Okay, but how does that help me when I'm actually doing the work? Let's say I need data from accounting and they're just ignoring my emails.
That is exactly when the charter becomes your shield.
My shield.
Yes. It's a tool to engage leaders when bottlenecks arise. If accounting is stonewalling you, you pull out the charter to show that a senior leader signed off on this as a strategic priority.
Ah, so it's leverage.
Exactly. It's your leverage. And it must be updated if there are strategic changes like a merger or acquisition.
Okay, so the charter gives us the authority. But who is doing the work? The sources talk about matrix organizations where you have two chains of command, the vertical functional lines like marketing, and the horizontal project team.
Right, the matrix structure.
Wait, two bosses, a vertical boss and a horizontal boss. That sounds like a recipe for a turf war and office politics. How does a worker actually survive that?
It sounds chaotic, I know. But the matrix actually breaks down workplace silos.
I know, it just sounds stressful.
Well, it relies heavily on the functional manager and the project manager trusting each other. When they align on strategic goals, it allows for an incredibly efficient sharing of specialized talent.
So you're borrowing an expert instead of hiring a new one.
Exactly. You borrow a top-tier designer from marketing just for the project, and then they go back. It's highly efficient if managed well.
Okay, so we have our charter and our team structure. Now, how do we actually execute the work? You have to choose a path. The sources dive into choosing a methodology.
Yes, and choosing the wrong one guarantees failure. You generally have predictive and adaptive methodologies.
Right, predictive being waterfall, which is linear and sequential, right? Like requirements, analysis, design, development, testing, deployment.
Precisely. It is best for strict compliance, fixed budgets, and clear end goals. And crucially, there's no going back.
So what does this all mean? I like to think of it like baking. Predictive is like baking a wedding cake. You can't unbake the flour once it's in the oven. You have to know what you want up front.
That's a great analogy. And on the flip side, you have adaptive or agile.
Which is iterative, right?
Yes, it embraces change. It's good when the end state is unclear at the start.
So keeping with the food theme, adaptive is like making a soup. You can keep tasting it, adding salt, maybe throw in some carrots as you go.
Exactly. You adjust based on real-time feedback. And within Agile, the text highlights Scrum and Kanban.
Scrum is the one with sprints, right? Short 2 to 4 week bursts of work.
Right. Sprints pulled from a prioritized backlog. And the key is the sprint retrospective, guided by a Scrum Master, where the team reviews their process and approves.
And Kanban is the visual board with the columns, right?
Yes, but the visual board isn't the secret weapon. It's the strict work in progress, or WIP limits.
Like you can only have 3 things in the doing column.
Exactly. It operates on a continuous pull basis. You don't pull new work until you finish the current task.
Which forces you to actually finish things instead of just starting a million tasks.
Yeah.
But the text also mentions this concept of learning to adapt.
Yes. Project managers need to consciously reset between projects. If you go on autopilot with the wrong methodology, you will fail.
Right, you can't bake a cake using a soup recipe. But, even if you pick the perfect methodology, disaster can still strike.
Always. Which brings us to anticipating disaster.
Yeah, we have to transition from how we work to what we are watching out for, namely risk, assumptions, and constraints.
This is critical. Every project plan is just a hypothesis about the future.
Let's define the terms. An assumption is something believed to be true without proof. And a constraint is a limiting factor, like a fixed budget.
Right. And you have to test your assumptions using a what-if-then analysis to unearth hidden risks.
But I've got a pushback here. Aren't assumptions just necessary shortcuts for our brains? I mean, if we stop to analyze every single assumption, won't we be paralyzed and never get any actual work done?
What's fascinating here is that every time we assume, we invite risk. Unexamined assumptions are the silent killers of projects.
The silent killers, wow.
Yeah. The goal isn't to eliminate assumptions entirely. That's impossible. The goal is to drag them out of the shadows into the risk register, where they can be quantified.
The sources give that great example of a high-rise in an earthquake zone.
Right, the construction project.
Yeah, breaking down risks by probability and impact. So seismic risk is high probability, high impact. But a trade union strike might be medium probability, medium impact.
Exactly, and that brings up the risk assessment criteria. Your risk scales must tie to project success measures.
Oh, like the IT upgrade example from the text.
Yes. If you're doing a massive IT upgrade, a 2-week schedule delay might be low impact. Who really cares about 2 weeks?
Right.
But a 30% data loss, that's catastrophically high impact.
Oh, absolutely.
If you use the wrong metric like only focusing on the schedule, you prioritize the wrong risks.
That makes so much sense because risks don't just exist in a spreadsheet. They affect people. And ultimately, it's people who need to be satisfied for the project to close.
Which brings us to the human element, managing stakeholders.
Right, the stakeholder register, mapping influence versus interest.
Going back to the high-rise example.
Oh, right. The city council has very high influence because they can pull your permits, but the future occupants have medium influence but really high interest.
Exactly. And they need different things. The occupants need emergency preparedness training, not engineering schematics.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Project closure. It's not just stopping work.
No, not at all. It involves formal handover, demonstrating functionality, releasing resources, meaning redeploying the team, and documenting lessons learned.
It makes me think of an analogy. Closing a project is like moving out of an apartment. You can't just walk away. You have to clean up, get your deposit back, which is your lessons learned, and officially hand over the keys to the next person.
That's a great way to put it. And that transition planning is essential. You have to train the end users so the project survives in the operations phase.
Because if you don't,
If you don't, all that strategic portfolio planning and program management was wasted. The end users won't know how to sustain the value.
right. So let's briefly recap this journey. We started with understanding the big picture of portfolios and operations.
We secured authority with a charter.
Picked a methodology, whether it was the predictive cake or the adaptive soup. We pressure tested our assumptions to find hidden risks. And finally, we handed over the keys. Because a project is temporary, but the value it creates should be permanent.
Absolutely.
Before we go, do you have a final thought for our listeners?
I do. We've seen how dangerous unexamined assumptions are in project management. But consider your own daily life, your career, your routines. What is the biggest foundational assumption you're operating under right now? And what happens to your personal project if you find out tomorrow that it isn't true?
Oh, wow. That is a heavy question to leave off on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Stay curious and keep questioning the blueprint. Why is it that a massive percentage of corporate projects just end in total disaster?
Right. It's wild.
Like these are initiatives with millions of dollars behind them. But then you look out the window at a bustling international airport, which is, infinitely more complex.
Oh, absolutely.
And you see dozens of giant metal tubes landing, thousands of bags routing through conveyor belts, tens of thousands of people just moving seamlessly. It looks like magic.
Yeah, but it's really not.
Exactly. But it almost never collapses into chaos. So today, we are opening the rule book to find out why it isn't magic at all.
Right, because it is entirely by design. What looks like effortless execution at an airport or, within any highly successful organization is actually the result of rigorous, unseen frameworks.
Yeah.
People tend to think that getting complex things done is just about, working harder or having a smarter team.
Like just muscling through it.
Exactly. But the reality is, it's about the structural mechanics operating beneath the floorboards.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to decode that secret language of execution.
Uncover the hidden wiring, basically.
Right. And we are pulling from a remarkably comprehensive manual on project management fundamentals and core concepts.
It's a great source.
It really is. It's packed with real-world case studies and some, honestly, fascinating transcripts from seasoned experts in the field. But to be clear to you listening, our goal here isn't just to memorize corporate jargon.
Far from it.
Yeah.
We are extracting the exact frameworks used to manage billion-dollar initiatives, sure. But we're going to look at the mechanics of why they actually work.
Yes, the why is the important part.
Right. The goal is to give you a practical toolkit to understand execution, strategy, and risk. So you can instantly apply these frameworks to your own work, your team, or even your personal ambitions, just to, prevent information overload and keep the chaos at bay.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because
Yeah.
before we can even talk about managing a specific project, the source highlights a massive point of failure right at the very beginning.
Big trap.
The big trap. Organizations constantly try to treat projects like operations, but the manual draws a hard, definitive line between the two, and that friction, that's where so many companies just bleed money.
Oh, yeah. It's a fundamental mismatch in physics.
How so?
Well, operations are the ongoing, permanent, repetitive execution of tasks. Think about like manufacturing a car on an assembly line.
Or running the daily accounting books.
Exactly. Operations are all about muscle memory and extreme efficiency. You want zero variance. Every car should be exactly the same.
Right.
A project, on the other hand, is completely different. It's a temporary endeavor to create a unique product or service.
Something new.
right? It has a definitive beginning and a definitive end.
It's a step into the unknown. And if you apply operations level efficiency metrics to a brand new project, you essentially strangle it before it even begins.
You really do.
Because, I mean, you can't ask someone stepping into the dark to move with the exact same repetitive efficiency as someone who's, been working on an assembly line for 5 years.
No, you definitely can't. Which is why the manual maps out an organization's efforts into a much larger ecosystem. They break it down into portfolios, programs, and projects.
Right, the big three.
And what's fascinating here is how these distinct levels actually interact to absorb all that risk we were just talking about. It's not just some rigid top-down hierarchy.
It's more dynamic.
Yeah. A portfolio is the highest level. It's a collection of projects, programs, and operations managed together to hit high-level strategic objectives.
Got it.
The portfolio manager is basically playing 3D chess with the company's resources.
Okay, I was trying to think of a way to visualize this for you guys listening. Think of it like a massive restaurant empire.
Oh, I like that.
So the portfolio is the overall corporate strategy to dominate the fast food industry.
Right, the big vision.
Yeah. And then the program would be the initiative to launch a brand new chain of pizza places.
Okay.
So a program is a collection of related projects managed together. And you do this because managing them as a group unlocks broader benefits you'd just never get if you manage them all in isolation.
Exactly. And that leads directly to the specific projects.
Right. So the project is the temporary, construction of one specific pizza location.
Yes, or designing the pizza ovens or writing the point-of-sale software. And then operations is the day-to-day making of the pizzas to actually generate profit once the project is finished.
The repetitive part.
Right. And the unspoken connection here is the division of labor. The portfolio manager's job is to secure and distribute the right resources at the right time.
Making sure we have the money to build the pizza places.
Exactly. Then the program manager's job is to look across all those related projects and basically act as a snowplow. They remove the barriers in front of the project team.
Oh, I love that analogy, the snowplow.
Yeah. And then the project manager's job is to drive down that cleared path and actually build the thing.
Okay, so you know your place in the ecosystem. The portfolio manager hands you the strategic goal.
Right.
But how do you actually extract the talent and the budget you need from other departments without sparking an immediate brutal turf war?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because everyone is fighting for the exact same resources. And this brings us to the organizational structure and this concept of the matrix organization.
Right. A matrix organization is essentially an attempt to break down those traditional corporate silos.
The rigid departments.
Yeah. Instead of a purely vertical chain of command where, the IT department only talks to IT and marketing only talks to Panos. Marketing, a project manager shares authority with those functional managers.
So you have two lines.
Exactly. You have vertical functional lines and horizontal project lines intersecting.
Okay, I understand the theory of a matrix org, but honestly, operating with two chains of command and having two bosses sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It can be.
When the head of IT and the project manager clash over a database expert's time because the IT head needs them for daily operations and the PM needs them for this big new initiative, who actually wins?
It's a common struggle.
How does this structure not just create massive confusion for the poor database expert caught right in the middle?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that exact clash is why the initiation phase of a project produces something called the project charter.
The charter.
Right. The charter is not just some polite summary of the work. It is the constitution of the project.
The rule book.
Exactly. It defines the high-level who, what, when, where, and how. But the absolute most critical element of the charter is the signature at the very bottom. It requires formal approval from a senior leader or an executive sponsor.
Oh, so it's delegated executive authority.
Yes.
It's not the project manager just going and asking the IT director for a favor. It is the project manager wielding a document signed by the CEO that explicitly says, this project is a strategic priority.
Exactly. That signature is the tiebreaker. Without an approved charter, you're just a person making requests. And the functional manager will prioritize their own daily operations every single time.
Which makes sense. They have metrics to hit.
Right. But with the charter, you actually have the backing to temporarily borrow that database expert. And when it's executed correctly, this matrix structure becomes incredibly cost-effective. The source actually uses the phrase, everyone's a hero here.
Wait, why is everyone a hero? That sounds a bit optimistic.
Well, think about it. The project manager is a hero because they get the highly specialized talent they couldn't afford to hire full-time.
Okay, true.
The database expert is a hero because they get to work on a cutting-edge strategic initiative, which breaks up the monotony of their daily operations.
Yeah, nobody wants to do the exact same thing forever.
And then when that expert returns to their functional department, they bring all that new knowledge and strategic context back with them. It cross-pollinates the entire company.
Oh, wow. So it literally transforms a turf war into a partnership.
Ex-
All right, so the charter averted the turf war. You've got your cross-functional team sitting in a room together.
Ready to go?
But now you have a team of highly opinionated experts from all these different departments. How do you actually get them to agree on how the work gets done?
That is the next big hurdle.
Because as the sources point out, failing to plan is planning to fail.
Right. And to answer that, the manual includes this great transcript from a seasoned expert named B.
Yes, B.
He's a global volunteer, 20 years of experience managing just incredibly complex projects.
He's seen it all.
He really has. And B emphasizes that before you choose a methodology, you absolutely have to understand the physical constraints of your work. You have to align your scope, your schedule, your resources, and your budget.
The iron triangle, basically.
Exactly. They are inextricably linked, kind of like the corners of a physical frame. If you pull on the scope to make the project bigger, the schedule and budget corners naturally warp and stretch with it.
You can't change one without breaking the others. Here's where it gets really interesting. Deciding how to manage that physical frame leads to a massive fork in the road in project management. The manual breaks down two fundamental approaches: predictive and adaptive.
The classic divide.
Yeah. So a predictive approach, which is often called waterfall, is very linear and sequential. It's like requirements, then analysis, then design, development, testing, and finally deployment.
One step at a time.
Right. I always hear people describe waterfall as building a house, but honestly, reading this, it feels way more like sending a rocket to Mars.
Huh. That is a much better way to look at it, actually.
Right, because every single math equation, every single requirement, it all must be perfectly calculated and approved before you ignite the engines.
Because once that rocket is in the air, you cannot just decide to turn left in space.
Exactly. Progress glows in one direction, and going back is catastrophically expensive.
Right. And predictive approaches are the absolute best choice when your end goal is incredibly well-defined, the budget is tight, and the stakeholders know exactly what they want.
No surprises.
But, the modern business environment is rarely that predictable anymore.
Which brings us to adaptive approaches like Agile, Scrum, or Kanban.
Which is more like driving a Jeep through an uncharted jungle.
Yes.
You don't have a map of the entire route. You really only need to see 10 feet in front of you. And you just turn the steering wheel when you see a tree in your path.
Right. Adaptive methods completely abandon the idea of a perfect, unchangeable final product on day one. They shift the whole focus to short, iterative phases.
Just quick bursts of work.
Exactly. In Scrum, these are called sprints, usually lasting 2 to 4 weeks. You pull a small batch of prioritized work, you build it, test it, show it to the user,
Get their feedback.
and adapt your plan for the next sprint based on reality, not on the assumptions you made a whole year ago.
Wait, though. If adaptive is so incredibly flexible and responsive to reality, why would anyone ever use a predictive approach anymore?
It's a fair question.
Because waterfall just sounds like a rigid trap where you're forced to stick to a plan even when the market completely changes. Well, because you cannot release a beta version of a concrete foundation.
Oh, yeah.
Right. You can't iterate on a pacemaker once it's already inside a patient's chest.
Good thing.
Adaptive works beautifully when the cost of change is very low, like rewriting some lines of code in a smartphone app.
Right. Just push an update.
Exactly. But if you are laying, say, 50 miles of fiber optic cable, the cost of changing your mind halfway through is just astronomical. You need the rigid trap of predictive planning to protect the budget.
That makes total sense. The terrain basically dictates the weapon.
Exactly.
The source also highlights another adaptive method called Kanban, which handles continuous flow. It uses those visual boards with columns to track work.
To do, doing, done.
Right, we've all seen them. But the true genius of Kanban, according to the manual, is that it relies on something called work in process, or WIP limits.
Yes, WIP limits are crucial.
The manual says it pulls work based on capacity to force focus. Let's look at the mechanism of a WIP limit because it is entirely counterintuitive to how most managers think.
Oh, absolutely. Most managers think that to get more done, Everyone should be working on 5 things at once.
Yeah, maximum utilization. Keep everyone busy 100% of the time.
Yeah, which is a disaster.
Exactly. Think of a team's capacity like a major highway. If that highway is at 100% capacity, meaning there is a car occupying every single square foot of pavement, what happens?
Traffic completely halts.
Right, it is a gridlock. No one gets anywhere. But if that highway is at, say, 85% capacity, cars actually have the space to maneuver, and traffic flows at top speed.
It moves so much faster.
A WIP limit artificially restricts the number of active tasks allowed in the system at any one time. You physically cannot start a new task until you finish an active one. It literally keeps the highway of your team's brain power from gridlocking.
Right. It forces the team to swarm the bottlenecks and actually finish the work rather than just starting 100 different things and finishing none of them.
Which we've all experienced.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
And the ultimate takeaway from the manual here isn't that Kanban is better than Scrum or adaptive is better than predictive.
Right, there's no one ring to rule them all.
No. Project managers today must learn to test for appropriateness. Often, that actually means creating a hybrid model.
Mixing them together.
Yeah. You might use a highly rigid predictive approach to procure and install the expensive computer hardware.
Because you can't return it easily.
Right. But then you use a fluid, adaptive sprint model to write the software that runs on it.
So you really have to consciously reset your mindset between projects rather than just forcing your own personal favorite methodology onto every single problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have our charter, our matrix team, and we've chosen our methodology, our rocket or our Jeep.
We're ready to go.
But the universe actively loves chaos. Things will go wrong.
They always do.
Which brings us to the art of organized paranoia, risk and stakeholder management.
Yeah, because even the most perfectly chosen methodology will just completely collapse if you don't map out the external forces acting upon it. The source actually provides a really vivid scenario to illustrate this. Imagine you're planning the construction of a new high-rise building, but it's located in a known earthquake zone.
High stakes.
Very high stakes.
Mm-hmm.
To manage this terrain, you utilize a stakeholder register and a risk register.
Okay, so you have to map out who has power and who actually cares.
Exactly.
In the high-rise scenario, the city council has very high influence because they control regulatory compliance, but they might not have high day-to-day interest in the actual pouring of the concrete.
Right.
But structural engineers have high influence and high interest because their professional licenses depend on the building not falling over.
Definitely.
And then you have the future occupants who have zero influence on the build itself, but a massive stake in, like, the emergency preparedness training.
Spot on.
Yeah.
And once you map the people, you map the threats in the risk register.
Okay.
You identify potential risks and score their probability and their impact.
Yeah.
So a seismic event has a high probability and a high catastrophic impact. But you also have to plan for highly probable lower impact things like material shortages or trade union strikes. Every single risk gets assigned an owner and a mitigation plan.
But there is a trap here, right? The manual includes this brilliant insight about how we assess that impact.
Yes, the scaling problem.
It uses a data loss example to show that your risk impact scales absolutely must match your project's true success metrics, or you will literally blind yourself to the real threats.
It happens all the time.
Let me see I've got this straight. Let's say you are upgrading a legacy IT system.
Okay.
A risk pops up that threatens to cause a 2-week delay on the schedule. Now, on a massive 14-month project, a 2-week delay sounds like a minor annoyance. So as a project manager, I just label that a low-impact risk.
And that is exactly what most people would do if they're only looking at the calendar.
Right.
But consider the alternative. What if the specific event causing that 2-week delay is a botched data migration that results in permanently losing 30% of all customer data?
Oh, wow.
Yep.
So if my primary dashboard is just tracking schedule variance, I see the 2 weeks and I completely miss the catastrophe. I might prioritize a minor budget overrun over a fatal loss of data.
Precisely why your risk scales must be calibrated to business value. If the true metric of success for the IT upgrade is data integrity and system uptime, then any risk-threatening data is an automatic high impact, regardless of what it does to the schedule.
To uncover those insidious threats, the manual introduces assumption and constraint analysis, which they call the what-if-then approach.
It's a great tool.
The core philosophy here is that every single time we assume something, we are extending an open invitation to risk.
Yes.
Let's say we assume we can source all our building materials locally for that high-rise. If that assumption turns out to be false, we suddenly have massive supply chain delays and import taxes we didn't budget for.
Constraints function the exact same way. A constraint is a limiting factor, like a belief that you cannot use an international vendor due to company policy. If that constraint is actually just a perceived limitation, like an outdated cultural norm, rather than a strict legal rule, you are blinding yourself to a potentially cheaper, faster solution. You have to document every assumption and relentlessly test it.
But how do you uncover risks that you don't even know you're blind to? Like, how do you test an assumption when your entire team has already internalized it as an undeniable fact?
This raises an important question, and honestly, it's the hardest part of the job. The most dangerous risks aren't the obvious ones like earthquakes. They are the tacit, hidden beliefs of your own team.
The things we take for granted.
Right. The manual warns about experiential learning blind spots. We all believe certain things are true simply because they were true on our last project.
We've always done it this way.
Exactly.
So how do you break that groupthink? Because staring at a spreadsheet in a conference room isn't going to suddenly make you realize you're inherently biased.
No, it won't. You have to intentionally disrupt your own thinking process. The source recommends active interventions, using role-play scenarios, storyboarding the absolute worst-case outcomes, and, crucially, bringing in external facilitators or subject matter experts who have absolutely no emotional attachment to the project.
People who aren't drinking the Kool-Aid.
Exactly. You need an outsider to look at your plan and ask, why on earth are you assuming this will work? You have to force people out of their comfort zones to see the walls they've built around themselves.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Let's take a second to review the journey we've been on today.
We've covered a lot.
We really have. We started by mapping the grand ecosystem, how your specific project is just a temporary vehicle driven by a program manager, funded by a portfolio manager who is playing 3D chess with the company's strategy.
Yep.
We looked at how the project charter acts as your ultimate weapon of authority to borrow talent in a matrix organization without starting a turf war.
Everyone's a hero.
Right. We explored the methodology fork in the road, choosing between the rigid, perfect math of a predictive rocket ship or the capacity-driven adaptive flow of Kanban WIP limits.
Rocket or Jeep?
And finally, we dug into the organized paranoia of risk management, tying our threat scales directly to true business value and hunting down our own hidden assumptions.
It really is a profound shift in how you view work. When you understand these mechanics, you realize that chaos is not inevitable. It is manageable.
And the relevance here applies to nearly everything.
Yeah.
Whether you are leading a corporate merger, launching a new piece of software, or honestly just trying to organize a massive family reunion with a tight budget.
Which is definitely a project.
These frameworks are your shortcut. They are the scaffolding that lets you execute with intention rather than just reacting to fires all day.
True. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final puzzle drawn straight from the text.
Well, I like a puzzle.
We just discussed how risk identification relies heavily on uncovering hidden assumptions and breaking our own biases.
Right.
However, the text also explicitly states that risk knowledge depends almost entirely on the preferences, beliefs, preconceptions, and experiences of the risk management team. An organization's entire risk appetite is essentially built from an accumulation of individual subjective perceptions.
Wait, if our entire ability to identify and quantify a threat is built on our own subjective experiences and our personal tolerance for danger, is a project's true risk profile ever actually knowable?
That's the question.
Or, when we assign low, medium, and high probabilities in our complex spreadsheets, are we really just mathematically dressing up our own psychological blind spots?
It is a haunting thought.
Huh.
Are we managing reality, or are we just managing our own perceptions of reality?
Wow. That completely changes how you look at a risk register, something for you to mull over until next time. And the next time you were standing in that massive airport, watching the luggage seamlessly route to the exact right plane, you will know exactly what is going on beneath the floorboards.
We see the frameworks.
Exactly. The magic isn't in the air. The magic is in the frameworks.
Imagine you are standing in front of a board of directors, right? And the air in the room is just completely dead.
Oh, the worst feeling.
Right. The CEO is just staring you down. Your new initiative is, well, it's 6 months late and something like $2 million over budget.
Yeah, we've all been in a room like that, or at least heard the horror story.
Exactly. And as you scramble to explain what happened, you realize the catastrophic failure didn't start with, bad code or supply chain collapse or even a lazy team. It started on day one
J1.
because you and your lead sponsor had completely different definitions of the word temporary. So, welcome to the deep dive.
It sounds like an exaggeration, but I mean, that exact scenario plays out in boardrooms every single day.
Yeah.
People just assume they're speaking the same language because, they're using the same English words. But in the realm of complex execution, those words have rigid mechanical definitions.
They really do.
And if you don't know them, you aren't just communicating poorly. You are actively dismantling your own work before you even start.
Which is exactly why we are here today. Whether you are stepping into a brand new management role, or maybe prepping for a massive strategic planning meeting, or you're just trying to decode the jargon of the corporate world so you can actually get things done, you are in the right place.
Absolutely.
We've taken a massive, pretty dense mountain of foundational source material on project management and core concepts. And we are doing something highly specific with it today.
We're distilling it down to the essentials.
Right. We are extracting the absolute most critical element, the definitions, and their real-world examples.
Because when you are managing, millions of dollars and hundreds of human beings, definitions are not just semantics.
Yeah.
They are the structural blueprints. They dictate who has authority, where the money actually comes from, and frankly, what success looks like.
Yeah, I want to arm you, the listener, with the exact vocabulary you need to walk into any room and understand the invisible machinery of how massive endeavors actually get executed.
It's like learning the Matrix code.
Exactly. So to help us translate all of this corporate speak into clear, actionable concepts, we're going to tear these definitions down to the studs. Let's start with the absolute foundation, the biggest divide in the business world, the big four containers of work.
The big four.
We hear projects and operations thrown around constantly. But if we're being ruthlessly precise, based on the text, what is the baseline definition of a project?
So a project is defined as a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result.
Okay.
The absolute foundational pillars of that definition are the words temporary and unique.
Temporary meaning it has to end. But, temporary doesn't necessarily mean short, right?
Right.
Because getting a human being to Mars is a project, and that takes decades.
In brief, it means it is finite. The temporary nature indicates there is a definitive beginning and a definitive, undeniable end to the work.
It's not an ongoing state of being.
Exactly. And the second word, unique, means it produces deliverables that separate it from existing products. It has clearly defined objectives that give it a well-defined scope.
So you are doing something that has not been done in exactly this way before.
That's it. That's the project.
Okay, so if that's a project, let's contrast that with the second major container, which is operations. How do we define that?
Operations are defined as the ongoing execution of activities which occur after a product is made to produce the same result or a repetitive service.
So let me make sure I have this strict dichotomy right.
Go for it.
If I work for a massive automotive company and we decide to build a revolutionary new electric vehicle, the design, the engineering, the prototyping, the safety testing of that very first vehicle, that is the project.
Yes.
But the moment we sign off on it and the assembly line starts pumping out 1,000 of those exact same cars every single day, we've transitioned into operations.
That is the exact line in the sand. And the foundational material we're looking at actually provides a brilliant, highly detailed comparison to separate projects and operations across several categories, because blurring that line is fatal.
So what's the first category?
Let's look at duration. As we just established, projects are temporary. They basically cease to exist after the unique product is made.
Right.
Operations, on the other hand, are permanent, or at least ongoing. They exist only after the product is created and can theoretically go on forever as long as there's market demand.
But what happens when we look at the money? Because a project manager and an operations manager have to view a dollar bill completely differently.
Oh, entirely differently.
How do the definitions differ when it comes to the budget?
This is where the structural differences really emerge. For a project, the budget is predefined and allocated. The stakeholders and the management who want this unique product to exist, they specify a budget for it up front.
Like writing a check.
Exactly. It's an investment of capital to create something out of nothing. But for operations, the budget isn't defined in that same rigid upfront allocation.
Wait, why not? An assembly line still needs money to run. It needs electricity, raw materials, payroll.
It does, but An operation has to pay for its own survival.
Oh, I see.
The core definition states that for operations, earning needs to be done to keep the operations alive. If there's a great market response and enough revenue and profit generated from the repetitive product, more products can be made.
So it's a loop.
Right. The operation funds its own continuity through efficiency and sales. A project burns cash to build. An operation generates cash to survive.
That is a massive distinction. A project burns cash to build, an operation generates cash to survive. Which, honestly, that perfectly ties into the risk profiles of these two containers.
Yes, it does.
If I'm doing something for the first time versus the 10,000th time, the risk has to be entirely different.
They are polar opposites. Projects carry a significantly higher risk profile because, by definition, you are doing this specific thing for the very first time.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. There is an inherent risk of failure. Technical failure, market failure, scheduling failure, because this unique product hasn't navigated reality yet.
And operations.
Operations carry significantly less operational risk. The product has already been made, the prototype worked. You are merely repeating a proven, known process to create them in greater numbers.
So if the risk is different and the funding is different, the focus of the human beings managing these things must change entirely. If I'm managing a project, what is my ultimate focus?
Your primary focus is performance. The project must achieve optimal performance and meet the very specific, unique requirements set by the clients or stakeholders and within the time constraint.
Get it done and get it done right.
Exactly. But if you are managing operations, your primary focus shifts to efficiency. The entire operation must be carried out in a way that reduces manufacturing time, minimizes waste, and optimizes repetitive processes to generate better revenue.
Make it cheaper, make it faster.
Right. And to put a bow on this strict divide, these two realms even have different titles for the people running them.
Okay.
Managing a project is obviously project management, but managing the ongoing assembly line,
What's that called?
that is defined as business process management. And some concrete examples of operations from the text, just to anchor this in your mind, are production lines, routine manufacturing, and standard accounting.
Accounting is an operation.
Yeah, because those are ongoing repetitive services required to sustain the organizational system.
Okay, so we have the project and we have operations. We know the difference between the prototype and the assembly line. But businesses don't just do one thing.
No, they don't.
They scale up into these massive complex structures. So let's define the next level up, the hierarchy. The program. What exactly is a program?
A program is defined as a collection of related projects managed in a coordinated manner to achieve benefits and control that would not be available from managing them individually.
So it's not just a bucket where a company throws all its random projects.
No, definitely not.
They have to be intrinsically related, and there has to be a mathematical synergy. Managing them together has to yield a greater result than managing them in silos?
Exactly. The scope of a program encompasses the broader perspective of a business, stepping away from the lower-level granular deliverables of a single project.
It's the big picture.
Right. Programs are linked to major strategic initiatives. This means they are often long-running and can even be permanent structures within a company. They exist to enable the organization to achieve a long-term business goal.
Which brings us to the biggest container of all, the portfolio. When a CEO talks about their portfolio, what is the strict definition of what they are actually managing?
A portfolio is a collection of projects, programs, subsidiary portfolios, and operations that are managed as a group to achieve strategic objectives.
Hold on. A portfolio contains literally everything. Projects, programs, and the day-to-day operations.
Yes. It is the highest level umbrella. An organization might have just one single enterprise portfolio that holds all the work within the company.
Wow.
Or, a massive multinational might have multiple portfolios divided by region or industry. But the defining characteristic here is that the portfolio's scope continuously evolves to respond to strategic business objectives.
So it changes as the market changes.
Exactly. It's continuously reviewed and updated to adapt to the internal and external environment. It is the living, breathing manifestation of the company's strategy.
Let me try a mechanical analogy here to see if I have this hierarchy right.
Let's hear it.
Let's say we were a transportation company, building a brand new, highly experimental electric delivery truck. That is a project. It's temporary, it's unique, it's high risk. Now, managing the development of the truck, alongside the project to build the charging stations, alongside the project to train the new drivers, that collection of related projects is the program. We manage them together because an electric truck is useless without a charging station.
Spot on.
And finally, the portfolio is the entire enterprise. The electric vehicle program, plus our legacy diesel trucking operations, plus our corporate accounting department, all being adjusted and funded to make sure the company stays profitable.
That is a flawless breakdown, and it brings us to what the foundational principles highlight as the most crucial, unspoken interaction between these three levels of management.
What's that?
Well, because it's a complex, interconnected ecosystem, there is a specific question, what we might call the golden question, that every manager at every level must constantly ask themselves to foster actual collaboration.
Okay, what is the golden question?
The question is, how is each one going to help the other two?
How is each one going to help the other two? I love that.
It's powerful, right?
It really is. It immediately forces you out of your silo. You can't just put your head down and look at your own spreadsheet. How do the different managers actually answer that question in practice?
The framework gives us three very specific definitional answers based on their specific roles. Let's start at the ground floor.
The project manager.
Right. A project manager answers that question by saying, I help the other two by contributing to achieve the benefits of the program with my specific actions and deliverables.
Notice the upward focus there.
Exactly. They are looking at how their specific, unique puzzle piece serves the broader picture.
And the program manager. The one managing the truck, the chargers, and the drivers.
The program manager answers, I help the other two by removing the barriers in front of the projects.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, their focus is downward and lateral. They aren't building the truck themselves. Their job is ensuring the individual project managers have what they need, resolving conflicts between the projects so the whole program succeeds.
Which leaves the portfolio manager, the one sitting at the top, looking at the entire transportation enterprise. What's their answer to the golden question?
The portfolio manager answers, I help the other two by providing the right resources at the right time to the projects and programs.
They're the ultimate allocator.
Exactly. They look at the entire board and move the budget, the human capital, and the strategic focus to where it will best serve the ultimate objectives of the company. Understanding these primary objectives and using this checklist of interactions is the definition of successful organizational management.
Okay, so if you are listening to this, you now have the exact vocabulary for what the work is. You know the difference between the project, the program, the portfolio, and the operations.
The what?
Right. But where does this work actually happen? How do companies physically structure themselves to do these things? That brings us to section 2, the structures and the spark.
Yes.
What are the defined organizational environments?
There are three primary organizational structures defined in the core literature. The first is a projectized organization.
Projectized.
Yeah. This is a company that deals exclusively with projects. Everything they do is a unique temporary endeavor.
Like who?
Think of a high-end consulting firm or a specialized construction contractor. When a job is done, the team dissolves and reforms around the next unique job.
Right. And the second structure?
The functional organization. This type deals primarily with operations. It's built entirely around repetitive, ongoing processes.
So an assembly line company.
Exactly. Think of a traditional manufacturing plant or a massive utility company. The structure is rigid, divided by function. You have the IT department, the HR department, the accounting department, and work flows down those established silos.
Those two make sense. They are the extremes. Projects on one end, operations on the other. But the third one, the matrix organization, this seems to be where the modern corporate world actually lives, and honestly, where things get incredibly complicated.
Extremely complicated.
How is a matrix organization defined?
A matrix organization is an organizational structure in which the project manager shares responsibility with the functional managers for assigning priorities and for directing the work of persons assigned to the project.
Let me push back on this.
Sure.
Because this sounds like a recipe for absolute disaster. A matrix organization inherently means an employee has two bosses. They are sharing resources.
Yes, they are.
If I'm a senior developer and my functional manager, the VP of IT, tells me I need to spend my week on an operational server update, but my project manager tells me I need to hit a critical deadline for a new app feature, who wins? Doesn't this structure just invite massive, endless turf wars?
It is the most common fear associated with the matrix, and yes, if mismanaged, it leads to intense friction. But there is a very specific reason this structure exists and a powerful counterpoint to that fear in the text.
Okay, what is it?
The defined purpose of the matrix organization is to ensure that teams are properly resourced and that communication flows efficiently across the entire organization, not just up and down silos.
So it's a necessary evil to prevent hoarding.
Exactly. Think about the alternatives. In a purely functional organization, specialized talent gets trapped in their department.
Right.
In a purely projectized organization, you might hire a brilliant database architect for a project, and when it's over, you have to fire them or pay them to sit on the bench.
Which is incredibly expensive.
Very. The matrix allows highly specialized talent to be dynamically deployed where they are most needed, balancing the ongoing keep the lights on operations with the strategic, innovative projects. It forces the VP of IT and the project manager to actually talk to each other and align on the company's highest priorities.
So the structure is the environment. It's the stadium where the game is played. But what is the spark? What actually breathes life into a project within these complex organizations? How does a project legally come into existence?
That spark is defined as the project charter.
The project charter sounds very grand, like the Magna Carta.
It kind of is.
What exactly is a charter in practice?
The project charter is defined as a key output of a project's initiation phase. It is the foundational document that contains details about the scope, the dependencies, the constraints, the risks, the mitigations, the roles and responsibilities, the deliverables by project phases, and the governance for the project.
Wait, if it contains all of that, the risks, the mitigations, the deliverables, isn't that just the entire project plan? Why call it a charter?
That is a critical distinction to make. The charter intends to convey all of this at a high level. It is not the minute-by-minute schedule or the granular technical specifications.
Okay.
It identifies the who, what, when, where, and why at a strategic altitude. It sets the strategic tone and the boundaries for executing the project.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. It's a document that says, we are building a bridge across this river. It must carry this much weight. It must be done by next year, and we have $50 million to do it. It doesn't tell you what size bolts to use.
And there's a fascinating detail in the framework regarding the project sponsor. The person who actually signs this charter and holds the purse strings.
Yes. The sponsor's formal endorsement on that charter is what gives the project manager the actual recognized authority to start spending money and assigning resources.
But there is an incredibly important dual role defined here. The sponsor gives formal approval to start the project based on the charter, but they also must formally approve the closure of the project upon completion.
Yes, and authorize the release of the final solution over to normal operations.
They're the alpha and the omega. They open the gate to start the work, and they're the only ones who can officially declare the work finished and hand it over to the operational assembly line. Why is that dual role so important?
Because without that formal sign-off at the beginning, a project doesn't officially exist.
Which is good.
Very good. It prevents rogue teams from wasting company time on unapproved pet projects. And without their formal sign-off at the end, the project is never officially closed.
What happens if it's not closed?
You get zombie projects, projects that drag on forever, constantly tweaking and polishing, eating up budget long after the core value has been delivered. The sponsor ensures the endeavor remains temporary.
Okay, so we have the container, we have the organizational structure, and we have the charter that sparks the whole thing into existence. Now we actually have to plan the work.
It's a hard part.
Let's move into Section 3, the pillars of planning and the products versus project divide. The core concepts highlight cost, quality, risk, and schedule as the fundamental pillars of project management planning. Let's unpack this and define the 5 specific management pillars that hold up any successful endeavor.
Let's start with the one that ruins more projects than anything else. Project scope management.
Scope.
The strict definition here is the process of ensuring the project includes all the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully.
Only is the key word there.
It involves setting strict boundaries, defining precise deliverables, and actively, aggressively avoiding scope creep.
Scope creep. If you've spent more than a week in any corporate job, you have heard this phrase, usually muttered in a dark corner.
Oh, yeah.
I like to think of scope creep not like a grocery trip where you buy too much milk, but like building a bridge.
Let's hear it.
You are contracted to build a simple 2-lane bridge across a river. Halfway through construction, the client comes to you and says, hey, while you're at it, could you make the bridge also function as a hydroelectric dam? It's right there in the water anyway.
And if you say yes without completely rewriting the charter, you are doomed.
Right.
Because you can't just add that feature. The foundational engineering, the materials, the physics of the bridge will literally collapse under the water pressure of a dam. Scope creep destroys the integrity of the original plan.
And it instantly violates the next two pillars. What is the second pillar?
Project cost management. This is defined as the processes of estimating, budgeting, monitoring, and controlling project funds to ensure the project stays within the approved budget.
If you add a dam to your bridge, your cost management explodes. And the third pillar?
Schedule management. This includes defining specific tasks, sequencing those activities, and estimating their duration to ensure timely completion.
The schedule.
Yeah. And there is a great insight in the source material from a PMP-certified expert named Hadget Landman. She provides a beautiful, dual-purpose definition of a schedule. She notes that, yes, your project schedule is a roadmap for your project. But crucially, she adds that the schedule is also the basis for your project budget and your cash flow.
Oh, that is a profound connection. We always say time is money, but in this context, it is a mathematical certainty.
It really is.
If a task is scheduled to take 1 week and it ends up taking 3 weeks, you aren't just late. You are paying for 2 extra weeks of labor, 2 extra weeks of equipment rentals, 2 extra weeks of overhead. You blow your schedule, you inherently blow your cost management pillar. They are tethered together.
Precisely. You cannot pull one lever without moving the other. Which brings us to the fourth pillar, risk management. This is defined as the processes of identifying, assessing, and mitigating potential risks that can negatively or positively affect project goals. This involves the continuous updating of a tool called a risk register,
which we will deconstruct in detail shortly.
We will.
And the final pillar holding the plan together.
Communication management. This is the process of informing all stakeholders in a clear, concise, and timely manner so that everyone remains on the same page.
Because if you don't do that,
if you don't manage the flow of information, the other 4 pillars will inevitably crumble because different teams will be making decisions based on outdated or conflicting assumptions.
So those are the pillars of planning a project. But within this planning phase, the foundational material draws a very sharp, explicit line between 2 types of management that constantly get conflated in modern tech and business.
Oh, yes.
Project management versus product management. What is the definitional divide here? Because people use these titles interchangeably on LinkedIn all the time.
They do, and it causes massive confusion. The framework explicitly contrasts them. Project management focuses on completing defined project tasks within the allocated budget and the agreed-upon schedule. It is fundamentally a temporary, execution-focused discipline.
Okay, temporary execution and product management.
Product management focuses on building and improving product features, functions, market positioning, and branding while satisfying long-term customer expectations.
So if we go back to our electric vehicle example, the project manager is waking up every day asking, are the battery engineers on schedule? Are we under our $50 million budget, and did we pass the safety test?
Right.
Their job is to deliver the car to the starting line. But the product manager is waking up asking, does anyone actually want to buy an electric truck with a 300-mile range?
Right.
Is the dashboard interface intuitive for a trucker? Does our branding make sense against our competitors?
That is the exact divide. Project management focuses on the temporary delivery. Product management focuses on long-term viability and value in the market.
And why is that distinction so crucial?
Here is why the distinction matters. You can have a project that is a massive textbook success. It is delivered 3 weeks early and 10% under budget. But if the product manager failed to understand what the market actually wanted, the product itself will be a total commercial failure.
Wow.
There are distinct parallel disciplines that must work in tandem. The project manager builds the thing right. The product manager ensures you are building the right thing.
Okay, so we know what we are planning, and we know who is managing what. Now, how do we actually play the game? How is the work physically executed? This brings us to Section 4. Defining the playbooks or the methodologies.
The rule books.
Right. The framework gives us 2 massive categories of approach.
The first category is predictive approaches. These are the traditional approaches to project management, most commonly referred to in the industry as waterfall.
Let's define the mechanics of waterfall.
Predictive approaches are defined as methods where progress flows in one direction in sequential steps. The entirety of the work is mapped out at the very beginning of the project before execution starts.
Like pouring a massive concrete foundation for a skyscraper.
Exactly like that.
You dig the hole, you lay the rebar, you pour the concrete, and you wait for it to cure. Once that concrete is poured and set, there is no going back to the rebar phase to make a quick adjustment without literally using dynamite and destroying the whole thing. The original plan has to match reality perfectly.
That is a highly accurate physical representation of a predictive methodology. The framework notes that there is very little room for error if planned expectations do not match reality.
Because you've already poured the concrete.
Right. With predictive methods, there is no going back to a previous stage once it is complete. It requires immense, rigorous, exhaustive upfront planning. If you are building a nuclear power plant, you absolutely want a predictive approach. You do not want the engineers improvising halfway through.
But the reality is most of us aren't building nuclear power plants. We are building software or marketing campaigns or organizational restructures where the world changes completely every 3 months.
And that leads us to the second playbook,
Right.
adaptive approaches. These encompass agile methodologies. These are defined as shifting the focus to more iterative models that allow teams to revise and adapt their projects as needed during the process, rather than waiting until the entire project is finished to review and amend.
So instead of planning the entire 100-step staircase up front, you plan one step, you build it, you stand on it, you look around at the landscape, and then you decide where the second step should actually go based on what you see.
That is the essence of agility. Adaptive approaches focus on quick, incremental delivery, prioritizing people and interactions over rigid processes, and favoring active collaboration over extensive documentation.
It sounds chaotic.
It can be. And crucially, the foundational texts note this requires a very specific type of leadership to work. Servant leadership. It requires a manager to drive organizational change by supporting the team rather than commanding them.
And the material gives us a very specific deep dive into one of the most popular adaptive methods, Scrum. These terms, sprint, Scrum Master, backlog, are everywhere in corporate life right now. Let's define the exact mechanics of Scrum so you, the listener, know exactly what game you are playing. First, what is a sprint?
In Scrum, the work is redefined into short, time-box cycles known as sprints. The definition states these usually last about 2 to 4 weeks.
So no year-long plans.
No. Instead of looking at a terrifying year-long Gantt chart, the team only selects work from their master list, the backlog for that specific short sprint iteration. At the end of the sprint, they must have a potentially shippable increment of work.
And who are the specific players in this Scrum game? Because the titles change. The framework defines 3 distinct roles. Let's start with the product owner. Who are they?
The product owner is defined as the organization's primary business representative. They are the ones talking to the customers and providing user stories, which are basically features or requirements written from the user's perspective for the product backlog.
And what's their main power?
Crucially, their defining power is that they control all additions or subtractions to that backlog.
So they are the ultimate gatekeeper of the work. If a rogue VP swoops in and says, I want this button to be blue, the developers don't just do it. That VP has to go to the product owner, present their requirement, and the product owner decides if it's valuable enough to enter the backlog.
Exactly. They protect the team from external chaos. Then we have the second role, the Scrum Master.
This is the one that confuses people the most. It sounds like a boss, but it isn't, right?
It is entirely different from a traditional boss. The Scrum Master is defined as the person who facilitates the Scrum process itself. They educate the team, they collaborate with stakeholders, but their primary defining job is to remove obstacles to the team's performance.
Give me an example of that.
If the team server is down, the Scrum Master fixes it. If the team is waiting on a legal approval, the Scrum Master goes and hunts down the lawyers. They don't manage the team's technical work. They serve the team by aggressively clearing the path ahead of them.
They are the snowplow.
Yes. And finally, the third role, the Scrum team itself.
Which is defined as?
Defined as cross-functional professionals who actually do the work. They participate in brief daily meetings, the daily scrum or stand-up, to share their progress, their plans for the day, and any obstacles they are facing.
Let me put you in the shoes of our listener for a second.
Okay.
If I am a traditional project manager who grew up in the waterfall method, I'm used to pouring that concrete. I'm used to controlling the entire schedule from the top down. I am a self-admitted control freak.
A very common profile.
How do I survive a company transition to an adaptive method like Scrum? Because my entire instinct is going to be to micromanage that process, tell the developers exactly what to do, and I'm going to ruin it.
It is a profound psychological shift, and the core material directly addresses this anxiety. The explicit advice is to consciously reset.
Consciously reset.
It notes that experienced, traditional project managers often go into a new project on autopilot, deploying their usual command and control tactics. But when the methodology changes to Agile, You must consciously stop and rewire your brain.
How so?
The text advises engaging with the team, working with them to think about how aspects will be carried out, rather than dictating the how to them.
You have to step back. You have to provide the goal, provide the support, but allow them the freedom to develop their own execution strategy. It's a fundamental shift in the definition of what a manager actually does.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've planned the work, we've picked our methodology, we have our team. But what happens when reality hits and things inevitably go wrong? Let's move to Section 5, deconstructing risk.
A very important section.
Risk management isn't about hoping bad things don't happen.
No, it's about mathematically anticipating problems before they derail the project. And the primary instrument for this, as strictly defined, is the risk register.
Risk register.
A risk register is a living tool used to identify potential risks, assess their probability and impact, and assign specific response strategies.
If you are prepping for a meeting right now, this is where you need to pay attention. The foundational material provides a fantastic table with exact, concrete examples of what a highly functioning risk register looks like.
It really is a great table.
I want to walk through these specific examples because it shows how different risks are handled by different parts of the organization. Let's look at example 1.
Example 1 is labeled seismic risk. The probability is assessed as high, and the impact is assessed as high.
So, an earthquake. We are building something in a fault zone. It is highly likely to happen, and it will be highly destructive if it does. What is the defined mitigation plan in the register?
The required mitigation is to implement strict seismic engineering designs up front, conduct regular structural seismic assessments during construction, and establish rapid emergency response plans.
Makes sense. Who owns that?
Crucially, the risk owner, the single individual responsible for ensuring this mitigation actually occurs, is the project manager. The status is listed as active.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a structural issue. The PM owns it. Let's look at example 2.
Example 2 is material shortages. The probability is listed as medium, but the impact is high.
Meaning a global supply chain hiccup might not happen, but if we run out of specialized steel, the entire project grinds to a halt. What is the mitigation?
The mitigation plan is to identify alternative secondary suppliers immediately, maintain a buffer stock of critical materials on site, and establish long-term locked-in contracts with primary suppliers.
And the owner.
Notice the risk owner here. It is not the project manager. The owner is defined as the procurement manager.
That is a brilliant distinction. You don't just dump every problem on the PM. The risk is assigned to the person with the actual functional power and organizational relationships to solve it.
Exactly. The PM doesn't negotiate global steel contracts. Procurement does.
Example 3.
Trade union actions, meaning potential strikes or labor disputes. Probability is medium, impact is medium.
Mitigation.
The mitigation. Develop contingency agreements with labor unions early, create performance incentive plans for workers, and maintain highly transparent, open communication channels.
And again, this would likely be owned by HR or a specialized labor relations manager.
Right.
But what's fascinating here is taking a step back and asking, where did these risks actually come from? How do we even know what to brainstorm and put on that register in the first place?
Well, the core material defines the roots of risk through two very powerful, distinct concepts: assumptions and constraints.
Assumptions and constraints. If you confuse these two, you are flying blind. Let's define an assumption.
An assumption is defined as a factor in the planning process that is considered to be true, real, or certain without any actual proof or demonstration.
It's a guess.
A very dangerous guess. The framework warns that every single time we assume something, we actively invite risk into the project. Because if that assumption turns out to be false, the foundation of your entire plan cracks.
And what about a constraint?
A constraint is defined as a limiting factor that affects the execution of a project or process. It restricts your options. It's a wall you cannot move.
A physical wall?
Or a metaphorical one. But the literature also notes something interesting. Sometimes a constraint isn't a physical reality, but is rooted in an organization's own overthinking or illogical perception of the rules.
Let's look at the specific practical examples provided to analyze these, because it gives us a rigorous 3-question test to apply to any situation.
What's the test?
1, could this statement prove false? 2, if it is false, would it affect the project? 3, should we convert it to a risk on the register? Walk me through the assumption example.
The assumption statement in the example is, there will be no regulatory compliance requirements for this new product.
Wow. Okay, let's run the test. Could that prove false? Yes. If you are building almost anything in the modern world, assuming regulators won't care is highly dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Question 2. If false, would it affect the project? Absolutely. Discovering a hidden compliance law could shut the project down entirely or require a massive, expensive redesign.
So, question 3. Convert to a risk.
Yes, that assumption must immediately become an active, high-priority threat on your risk register.
Yeah.
You need lawyers looking at it yesterday.
Now let's run the test on the constraint example.
I know.
Constraint statement is, our organization does not internally produce the construction materials required for this build.
Okay, question 1. Could that prove false? The framework says no. It's a verifiable fact. You are a software company building a new headquarters. You don't own a concrete plant.
Right.
Question 2. If it were false, would it affect the project? Yes, it would drastically change how you source materials. But question 3, do you convert this constraint into a risk on the register? The answer is no.
And why is it a no? Because it is a known, accepted, verifiable limitation. You address it normally through alternative solutions, like simply hiring a supplier. It doesn't threaten the project's success in the chaotic, unpredictable way that a false assumption about government regulations would.
So if assumptions are the hidden landmines, how do we systematically sweep for them? How do we find our own blind spots before they explode?
The material defines a specific structured technique for this.
If you are listening to this and you're a mid-level manager, this technique is exactly what you should be bringing to your Monday morning stand-ups to look like the smartest person in the room.
It is called the what-if-then approach. It's a structured, logical thinking tool designed to unearth hidden patterns and silenced inconsistencies in a team's plan.
How does the what-if part work?
The what-if portion involves the team actively detecting shaded areas, probabilistic negative happenings in the future. For example, what if our primary overseas supplier goes bankrupt mid-project?
And the then portion?
The then portion forces the team to explore the cascading, later effects of denouncing their previously held assumption.
So walk me through that.
So, if the supplier goes bankrupt, then our underlying assumption that materials will arrive on schedule is proven false. Then we will incur a minimum 3-week delay on the critical path. Then we will miss our market launch window.
Oh, wow.
By strictly defining the then, you explore a whole new string of identified cascading risks that must immediately go on the register. It prevents wishful thinking.
It forces you to play out the worst-case scenarios with cold mechanical logic. Okay, so we've managed the tasks, we've controlled the schedules, and we've swept for the risks. But none of this machinery operates in a vacuum. It is operated by and built for human beings.
The messy part.
Exactly. Let's dive into Section 6, the people and the code. We need to define the players on the board. Who exactly are the stakeholders?
The core material draws a very sharp distinction between traditional stakeholders and a much broader modern definition.
What's a traditional stakeholder?
Traditional stakeholders are the individuals and groups directly, financially, or structurally connected to the project. This includes the project sponsor, the organization's investors, the employees, the paying customers, the hired contractors, the lenders, and the project team itself.
People with skin in the game.
Right. They have obvious, direct, usually financial reasons for interest in the project's success or failure.
But the framework emphasizes that if you only manage traditional stakeholders, you will eventually get blindsided. We need to expand the definition.
Yes, the modern definition of a stakeholder expands outward to include groups completely outside the primary organization that could still impact the project.
Like who?
This could include local community action groups, municipal governments, competing businesses, or environmental regulatory agencies. They might not be funding the project, and they might not be your customers, but they possess the power, the influence, or the legal authority to drastically impact its execution.
And managing all of these people, the internal team, the nervous investors, the skeptical community, requires more than just a schedule. It requires a moral compass because a project manager wields significant power and budget.
They absolutely do.
The foundational material explicitly defines the rules of engagement through the PMI Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. It outlines 4 core values. Let's define them, not as abstract morals, but as practical tools.
The 4 core values defined are responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty.
Let's break those down.
Responsibility is defined as taking ownership of your decision, admitting errors, and making choices in the best interests of society and public safety, not just profit.
And respect?
Respect is defined as treating individuals fairly, listening to others, and actively encouraging different perspectives.
Fairness?
Fairness means making decisions impartially and objectively, free from competing self-interest, prejudice, or favoritism.
And finally, Honesty.
Honesty is defined as understanding the truth and acting in a truthful manner both in your communications and your conduct.
Those sound great on a corporate poster, but the real test is when things go wrong. The material actually applies these definitions to specific, highly uncomfortable scenarios.
The real-world tests.
Let's role-play these to show how these definitions dictate behavior in the trenches. I'll give you this scenario, and you tell me how the code demands we act.
Let's run them.
Scenario 1.
Oh.
A project manager realizes late in the project that the project's budget has been completely exhausted due to a miscalculation, and these massive additional costs were not communicated to the stakeholders.
Oh, wow.
This is a career-ending nightmare scenario. The instinct is to hide it, move money around, and hope nobody notices. What does the framework dictate?
According to the ethical framework, the manager must immediately apply the defined values of honesty and responsibility. They cannot hide the overrun, cook the books, or try to quietly fix it in the shadows.
They have to confess.
Yes. They must accept their mistake, truthfully and fully communicate the exact ugly financial situation to the stakeholders without delay, and take full personal responsibility for the oversight. The transparency is mandatory, even if it hurts.
Scenario 2. During the selection process for a highly lucrative project team, the project manager feels inclined to choose team members based on their personal relationships and friendships, rather than looking objectively at qualifications or skills. They just want to work with their buddies.
This requires the strict application of fairness. The definition of fairness here dictates that the selection process must be transparent, objective, and based strictly on competence and suitability for the roles, actively avoiding the favoritism of personal relationships.
Because it hurts the project.
Yes. If you hire your friend over a more qualified candidate, you are not just being a bad manager, you are actively violating the core ethical value of fairness to the project, the investors, and the organization.
Scenario 3. In a high-stress meeting, a junior team member offers a radically new approach to solve a critical project issue. But it is completely different from the traditional methods the senior managers are used to. It's disruptive. The instinct is to shut them down and say, that's not how we do things here.
This is where respect is applied as a practical tool. The project manager must value and respect the teammates' ideas, even if they contradict the usual comfortable methods.
So they have to listen.
The definition of respect involves actively encouraging diverse perspectives, which the material notes is not just about being polite. It is a functional necessity that often leads to more innovative, efficient solutions. You don't dismiss an idea just because it challenges the status quo. You respect the contribution and evaluate it on its merits.
So these definitions of ethical values aren't just HR buzzwords. They are practical guardrails for navigating crises, maintaining team trust, and preventing lawsuits. Which brings us, finally, to the end of the journey.
The wrap-up.
Section 7. The end of the line. We've initiated, we've planned, we've executed. How does it all end? Let's define the wrap-up mechanisms. The framework relies heavily on project phases. What exactly constitutes a phase?
A project phase is strictly defined as a collection of logically related project activities that culminate in the completion of one or more specific deliverables. It is a distinct chapter of the work.
And how do we safely move from one chapter to the next without carrying errors forward?
Through what is defined as phase gate reviews. Think of these as structural airlocks.
Airlocks, I like that.
They are formal inspections at the end of a phase to check the outcome against highly specific exit criteria. This could be checking the work against contractual obligations, safety standards, or specific performance targets.
And if it doesn't pass?
You cannot pass through the gate. You cannot open the inner door until the criteria of that phase are demonstrably and provably met. It stops flawed work from infecting the next phase of the project.
And once we pass all the gates, the product is fully built and we have to hand it over. The framework defines this as the transition.
Yes, transition is defined as the change from one state to another, specifically moving the completed asset from the temporary project delivery environment over to the permanent organizational operational activity.
The moment it becomes an operation.
Exactly. It's the moment the unique prototype officially becomes an ongoing, repetitive service.
The material mentions a specific framework for managing this life cycle called Disciplined Agile Delivery, or DA. What are the defined phases within that specific model?
DAD defines a sequence of three main phases: inception, construction, and transition. And the explicitly stated intention of this final transition phase is to produce consumable solutions.
Consumable, what does that mean in this context?
The definition of consumable here is vital. It means the solution must be immediately usable, desirable to the customer, and fully functional. It's not just the software code. It comprises the software, the hardware, the user documentation, and the new organizational process structures required to run it. It has to be a complete package.
So the product is built, it is fully consumable, and it has seamlessly transitioned to the operations team. Are we finally done? Can the project manager turn off their phone and go to sleep?
Not quite yet. There's one final vital definition that separates amateur organizations from world-class organizations: administrative closure.
Which means what exactly? Filing paperwork.
It is much more than that. Administrative closure involves obtaining that formal, final sign-off from the sponsor that we discussed at the very beginning, officially and legally acknowledging that all deliverables are complete and accepted.
Right.
But crucially, administrative closure formally mandates the documentation of lessons learned.
Why is that explicitly defined as a mandatory key activity? Why not just celebrate and move on?
Because, as the foundational texts state, remarkable work experience, painful mistakes, and invaluable tactical knowledge generated by the project team will evaporate if not formally recorded.
Evaporate.
Yes. Documenting best practices, analyzing estimating errors, and recording resource realities enables the organization to maintain that knowledge and reuse it for future projects. If you skip this step, the organization gains a new product, yes, but it completely fails to gain intelligence. You are doomed to repeat the same expensive mistakes on the next project.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and look at the immense structural value of what we have just mapped out. By extracting these precise, rigid definitions from the massive, overarching strategic scope of portfolios and programs down to the granular operational reality of a matrix organization, the agile mechanics of a scrum sprint, the specific risk ownership in a register, and the ethical guardrails of the code of conduct, we have mapped the entire vocabulary of execution.
We have translated the invisible machinery. You now have the exact language required to define the boundaries of your work, protect your scope from collapsing, and manage the complex realities of financial risk and human behavior.
Whether you are building a revolutionary piece of software, constructing a physical skyscraper, or reorganizing an entire global department, these definitions are the literal blueprints for keeping chaos at bay. They are the difference between merely hoping a project succeeds and methodically architecting its success.
But if I can leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've defined today. We have spent this entire time defining how to structure work, how to plan schedules, how to aggressively mitigate risk through registers, and how to rigorously control progress through phase gates. But consider this.
Wow.
If the very foundational definition of a project is its newness, its uniqueness, and the inherent necessary risk of doing something for the very first time, is the ultimate organizational risk actually overplanning?
Oh, that is a fascinating question. Are we managing the risk, or are we suffocating the uniqueness?
Right.
Is it possible to overdefine the constraints, overpopulate the risk register, and lock down the phase gates to the point where you accidentally turn an innovative creative project into a rigid repetitive operation before it's even fully built?
Precisely. The structures exist to enable the work, not to crush the innovation out of it.
Next time you sit down to sign a project charter, ask yourself, am I genuinely planning for a breakthrough success, or am I just planning to avoid any possible surprises? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the language of execution. Take this vocabulary, define your boundaries clearly, and go build something remarkable.
Imagine you're handed $50 million and you're told to merge two bitter rival tech companies in 6 months.
Yeah, that's a nightmare scenario right there.
Right. And if you succeed, you completely revolutionize the industry. But, if you fail, thousands of people lose their jobs, and the resulting corporate chaos makes headlines for years.
Absolutely. And when the stakes are that high, a motivational speech just isn't going to cut it.
Exactly. You need a rigorous, airtight system to just stop the chaos from eating you alive.
It is entirely about controlled execution. I mean, behind every seamless product launch or massive infrastructure build or that successful corporate merger you mentioned, there's this invisible scaffolding holding the whole thing together.
Yeah, and it looks like magic from the outside.
Oh, totally looks like magic. But backstage, it is just a daily grinding battle against tight budgets, shifting requirements, and, well, human unpredictability.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a massive stack of foundational frameworks, training materials, and insider insights to completely demystify the core concepts of project management.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. And our mission for you, the listener, is to extract the absolute DNA of how complex things actually get done out there in the real world. Because whether you are managing that multi-million-dollar corporate merger.
Or you're just, trying to organize a massive family reunion without losing your mind.
Yes, exactly. Understanding these mechanics will make you a radically more effective leader, organizer, and just a better thinker in general. So, okay, let's unpack this. Before we can actually build anything, we have to understand where a quote-unquote project even fits into the vast universe of work.
Right, because we can't build a new engine until we know what kind of vehicle we're actually putting it into. And to do that, we have to draw a very hard, definitive line between a project and operations. So a project is a temporary endeavor. It has a specific beginning, a definitive end, and it's undertaken to create a single, unique product, service, or result.
Well, operations are kind of the exact opposite, right?
Yes, completely the opposite. Operations are ongoing, they're repetitive, and their entire purpose is just to sustain a system or continuously generate profit with, ideally, zero surprises.
I always think of it like the restaurant business.
Oh, yeah? How so?
Well, a project is like a Michelin star chef spending 6 months in a test kitchen, failing constantly, just to cook a brand new, wildly complex recipe for the very first time.
Okay, I like that.
And then operations is what happens after that dish makes the menu. You run a franchise where a line cook makes that exact same meal 1,000 times a day perfectly without changing a single ingredient.
That is a perfect analogy, and it really highlights why projects inherently carry a terrifying amount of risk.
Because of that friction between the two worlds.
Exactly. That friction is absolutely the source of the risk, because projects are intrinsically disruptive. You are doing something that hasn't been done quite this way before in your organization.
Right.
Operations are all about efficiency, permanence, and minimizing variance. So when you start a project, you are basically introducing chaos into a system that was built for stability.
Yeah, that makes sense. But neither of these things exists in a vacuum, do they?
No. Above the daily grind of your projects, you have what we call programs. And these are collections of related projects managed holistically.
Okay.
You group them together to achieve these overarching benefits that you simply couldn't get if you managed them all in isolation. And then above that, sitting at the very top of the mountain, you have portfolios.
So the portfolio is kind of like the organizational compass.
Yes, exactly. It's a collection of projects, programs, and operations managed as a group to achieve massive strategic objectives.
But having a hierarchy on paper doesn't actually guarantee real teamwork. People still operate in silos.
Oh, all the time. But there is a brilliant, almost ruthlessly simple checklist question that bridges all these tiers and forces alignment.
Which is?
How is each one going to help the other two?
Wow. Yeah, that is simple.
But if you can't answer that question, your corporate structure is essentially broken.
Right.
A project manager should be able to, I'm helping by delivering the specific benefits of this program.
And then the program manager steps in.
Exactly. The program manager says, I'm helping by removing systemic bottlenecks so those projects can actually succeed. And then the portfolio manager says, well, I'm helping by looking at the big picture and providing the exact right funding and resources at the exact right time.
It basically forces everyone to look up from their own laptops and acknowledge that they're in an interconnected system.
Precisely.
But, getting those resources from the portfolio level isn't just an automatic process. You don't just ask nicely and get $1 million.
I wish it worked that way, but no.
Right. Getting resources requires rules of engagement. You need a constitution, basically, and a structural chain of command before you start, or the whole thing just instantly devolves into a turf war.
Which brings us to the Integrated Project Charter and the Matrix Organization.
Yeah, but I gotta push back here for a second.
Right.
When you say charter, it honestly just sounds like a thick stack of corporate red tape.
A lot of people feel that way.
Why can't we just get a smart cross-functional team together in a room and just start building the thing?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, skipping that initial structural phase is the fastest way to guarantee your project dies a slow, agonizing death.
Really? Just from skipping a document?
Because the Integrated Project Charter isn't just a bureaucratic form, it's a strategic tone setter. It is a document formally approved by a sponsor, which is usually a senior executive, that strictly defines your scope, your governance, and your boundaries.
Okay, so it gives you authority.
Exactly. When you inevitably hit a bottleneck, or, say, a department head flat out refuses to give you the data you need, a verbal agreement means absolutely nothing.
Right. They'll just ignore you.
Exactly. Without an approved charter, You have no documented escalation procedures and zero actual leadership backing.
Oh, I see. It's almost like a diplomatic passport.
That's a great way to put it.
Because without a charter, your project team members are just regular corporate citizens. They can be drafted by their department heads at any time to put out daily operational fires. But the charter is a passport signed by the CEO. It gives your team a level of immunity from being pulled back into the daily grind.
And you desperately need that protection, especially if you are working in what's called a matrix organization.
Which is pretty common now, right?
Oh, very common. But notoriously difficult to navigate.
Huh.
In a matrix organization, an employee essentially has two chains of command.
Right, the vertical and the horizontal.
Exactly. You have the vertical chain, which is your normal functional department.
Yeah.
So say you're a graphic designer, you report to the VP of marketing. But you also have the horizontal chain, meaning you also report to the project manager for a specific temporary initiative.
I mean, that does break down corporate silos, which is great.
It is great, but it requires an immense amount of trust and crystal clear priorities to actually work.
Yeah, because if you've ever had your department manager tell you to drop everything to design a new ad campaign, but then the leader of your special project tells you, hey, your deadline for the new app interface is tomorrow.
You're stuck.
You're completely stuck. You've experienced the dark side of a matrix. You are caught in a corporate tug of war.
And that's why the charter is the ultimate tiebreaker.
But enforcing that tiebreaker requires a massive amount of integrity from everyone involved, which kind of brings us to the underlying ethics of project management. The profession actually relies heavily on a code of ethics, right? Built on 4 pillars.
Yes. Responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty.
And those aren't just feel-good buzzwords.
Not at all. They are practical survival tools.
Yeah.
Let's consider a scenario. Imagine a project manager realizes late in the construction phase that the budget is completely exhausted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, due to a massive miscalculation early on. Applying honesty and responsibility means owning that mistake and communicating it truthfully to the stakeholders immediately.
Which is terrifying to do.
Extremely terrifying. The temptation to hide it or to cut corners on safety or to use, creative accounting, it's huge.
But hiding it destroys the project entirely when the truth eventually comes out.
Always does.
But it takes a culture of deep psychological safety to actually admit that kind of failure. If people are afraid of getting fired, they're going to hide risks. And hidden risks are the silent killers of any endeavor.
Absolutely. Which means we have to talk about planning.
Right. Because effective planning isn't just about scheduling tasks. It requires staring directly into the abyss of everything that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah, you have to balance cost, quality, risk, and schedule. And risk management is really where projects are won or lost.
How do you even begin to manage that, though?
It requires a rigorous process of risk identification through what's called assumption and constraint analysis. Every single plan is built on assumptions, which are things we believe to be true without proof, and constraints, which are the hard factors that limit our options, like, say, a fixed budget.
So to uncover the hidden landmines in those assumptions, you have to use a what-if-then structured thinking approach.
Yes. You look at an assumption and ask, could this prove false? If yes, would it affect the project? If yes, you convert that assumption into a documented risk.
And here's where it gets really interesting, at least for me. Risks are not just threats.
No, they aren't.
A risk is simply an uncertainty that matters, which means a risk can actually be an opportunity.
And that completely flips how most people view the world. We generally have 5 ways to respond to a negative threat. We can escalate it to higher management, avoid it entirely by changing the plan, transfer the financial burden by, buying insurance, mitigate it by reducing the likelihood, or we can simply accept it.
Those are standard threat responses.
But if you realize an uncertainty could have a positive impact, your strategy completely changes.
There is a brilliant example of this from the sources. So imagine a real estate developer building a complex of luxury lake house townhouses, right? And they intend to sell them for $750,000 each.
Okay, pretty high stake.
Exactly. But during the risk analysis, they realized there is a 50% chance of the lake overflowing in the spring, and that would cause $200,000 in flood damage to the property.
That is a massive threat.
Huge. And you could mitigate it by building further from the shore, or you could transfer it with flood insurance. But if you look at that excess water as an opportunity...
You can exploit it.
Yes, exploit it.
Precisely. Instead of just fighting the water, the developer could install a subterranean mechanism to catch that excess lake overflow and route it into a free, sustainable landscape irrigation system for the entire complex.
I mean, you just took a potential disaster and turned it into a major selling feature.
Exactly. For positive risks or opportunities, your responses are to escalate, exploit, share Lycus, perhaps partnering with the local utility enhance, or accept.
But this level of creative thinking is just impossible if you let psychological bias blind you to the realities of the project.
Oh, that bias is so dangerous.
Yeah.
If a project manager just came off a job that failed miserably because of, say, a sudden labor strike, they are going to see labor risks hiding behind every single corner, even if the current project is fully automated.
Right, they're carrying that baggage with them.
Exactly. The what-if-then framework forces objective documentation. It strips the personal trauma out of the planning phase. And when you are assessing those risks, your criteria absolutely must align with your specific success measures.
This is a trap I see constantly.
Evaluating risks in a vacuum.
Yes. Let's look at an IT data migration project. If you prioritize your risks solely based on schedule impact, a risk that threatens to delay the project by 2 weeks looks like a massive, glaring red flag.
Naturally.
But what if the ultimate goal of the project isn't speed, but perfect data integrity?
That a totally different risk one that might only cause, say, a one-day delay but carries a 30% chance of permanently corrupting customer data is actually the catastrophic threat.
Exactly. You have to prioritize the data loss threat over the schedule threat, even if the schedule threat is highly likely to happen. You have to measure the risk against what actually provides business value.
Which naturally leads us right into the execution phase.
Yep.
You've identified your risks, you have your charter in hand. How do you actually build the product?
Right, the methodology.
Yes, you have to choose a methodology that matches the reality of your environment. You cannot force reality to fit a framework.
And we generally have predictive approaches, adaptive approaches, and hybrid models. So, predictive, familiarly known as waterfall, is sequential and linear. You gather requirements, you do the analysis, design the product, test it, and then deploy it.
Step by step.
Right, you finish one distinct stage before you ever start the next. It's inflexible by design, which actually makes it perfect for heavily regulated industries where the end goal is totally defined and legally it just cannot change.
But if your environment is volatile, you need an adaptive approach, like Agile.
Everyone loves to talk about Agile.
You do. Agile is iterative. It basically assumes the customer doesn't actually know what they want until they see it.
Which is usually true.
Almost always true. So it embraces continuous change. Under Agile, you have specific frameworks like Scrum. Scrum operates in short bursts, usually 2 to 4 in sprints.
Okay.
You have a product owner defining the vision, a Scrum master who focuses on removing obstacles, and a cross-functional team that's constantly pulling work from a backlog and adjusting on the fly.
And you also have Kanban, which is fascinating because it's purely visual.
Oh, Kanban is great.
Yeah, you have a board with columns for to-do, doing, and done. But the entire mechanism of Kanban relies on strict work in progress, or WIP, limits.
The WIP limits are crucial.
They really are. If the doing column has a WIP limit of 3, the team absolutely cannot start a 4th task no matter how much the client yells at them.
No.
I think of a WIP limit like a massive bouncer at a crowded nightclub. You know, if the club is at fire capacity, no new guests get through the door until someone currently inside leaves.
It physically forces a team to finish what they started before pulling new work. It instantly kills bottlenecks.
But wait, Agile has become such a massive corporate buzzword that executives just try to apply it to everything.
What's fascinating here is that project managers must learn to consciously reset their methodology between initiatives using an appropriateness test. You choose your weapon based on cost, team size, timeline, and flexibility.
Right, because, I mean, if I am building a physical high-rise, I shouldn't be using agile sprints to iteratively figure out what the concrete foundation looks like on week 3.
No, absolutely not. You pour a foundation once. It has to be predictive.
But a hybrid approach could be incredible for that exact same building, right? You use rigid waterfall to construct the physical steel and concrete, but then you use highly adaptable agile to develop the high-rise's internal smart software systems over the next 2 years.
The danger of that hybrid approach, though, is the culture clash.
Oh, sure.
Blending those worlds requires massive stakeholder education. Because if you run a hybrid model, what happens when the agile software team who expects to change requirements weekly tries to hand off their system to the waterfall hardware team whose requirements were locked in stone 6 months ago?
That sounds like a disaster.
Without a rigorous communication strategy, the project shatters right at the interface.
Which brings us to the ultimate wild card in all of this, the humans.
Always the humans.
You can have the most elegant hybrid framework in the world, but if the people involved aren't aligned, you are completely doomed. Frameworks don't do the work. Messy, emotional humans do. And you have to manage them using a stakeholder register.
Right. So if we go back to that high-rise construction and imagine it's in a dense downtown earthquake zone, you have to map every single human affected by their influence and their interest.
Okay, so the city council has very high influence because they can just revoke your building permits tomorrow.
Exactly. So they need detailed weekly compliance reports.
But the local neighbors, they have medium influence and high interest. They don't need to see your architectural blueprints. They just need public notifications about noise curfews and road closures.
Treating those two groups exactly the same is a massive waste of resources, and it invites disaster.
And when it comes to managing the internal team, you use the RACI model.
Yeah.
RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
The ultimate weapon against ambiguity.
Yes. So responsible means the person actually doing the physical work. Accountable means the person whose head is on the chopping block. If it fails, the buck stops with them.
Right.
Consulted means subject matter experts you need input from. And informed means people who just need to be kept in the loop so they don't panic.
And implementing this stops the two most common organizational failures. First, the excessive concentration of power, where one micromanager insists on being responsible for everything and just becomes a massive bottleneck.
We've all worked with that person.
Oh, yeah. And second, the fragmentation of power, where everyone just assumes someone else is handling it.
So what does this all mean for the endless, soul-crushing Friday meetings we all suffer through? Because there is a terrifying survey from Microsoft detailing how 38,000 employees felt that out of the average 5.6 hours they spent in weekly meetings, nearly 70% of that time was completely, hopelessly unproductive.
It's staggering.
It is. So if we apply RCI to a meeting and label 3 different people as accountable for a new initiative, doesn't that psychologically guarantee that no one is actually accountable?
That is exactly the diffusion of responsibility. Everyone smiles, nods, and leaves the room, assuming the other guy's going to draft the document. Roles must be strictly singular. Only one person can ever be accountable for a specific decision. And to rescue those 5.6 hours of lost time, you need a rigid formula.
Which is?
Send a clear agenda 48 hours early, no surprises. Have standing items with strict durations, like if the budget update has 5 minutes on the agenda, you cut the mic at 5 minutes.
And the most important part, do a rapid round robin at the end of every single meeting to capture the who, what, and when for all action items. By applying RACI directly to that round robin, you create inescapable accountability before anyone is allowed to leave the room.
Yes, exactly.
And when you finally take that progress and communicate upward to the executive suite, you have to keep it incredibly simple. Your CEO does not want a guided tour of your intricate Kanban board.
Oh, please, never show an executive how the sausage is made unless they explicitly ask. Executive reporting should rely on master dashboards, high-level milestones, and simple scorecards.
You just need to map your project's timeline directly to their key business initiatives. Show them how your work is moving the needle on their strategic goals.
Keep it high level.
Right. Okay, so we've mapped the stakeholders, we've survived the meetings, the executives are happy, and the product is finally built. The project is a success. We just pop the champagne and go home, right?
Not quite. The finish line is actually the most dangerous part of the race.
Really?
Yeah, project and phase closure is a highly structured transition. It requires formally archiving the knowledge you gained. This involves building out what are known as perils project, experience, risk identification libraries.
Perils.
Yes. Think of it like a black box flight recorder. You document every assumption that proved false, every risk that materialized, and every lesson learned, so the next project team doesn't step on the exact same landmines.
The danger of what is called undue closure, which is basically just abandoning the project once the product is built, is massive. It's like moving out of a rental apartment.
How so?
Well, you don't just leave all your furniture inside, leave the front door wide open, and run away in the middle of the night.
No, you don't.
You have to clean the space, officially hand the keys over to the landlord, and make sure the new tenant knows where the breaker box is.
I love the rental analogy because leaving without a formal closeout leaves a massive mess. You leave your organization legally liable to vendors whose final contracts were never formally closed.
Yikes.
You face regulatory noncompliance because the final audit paperwork wasn't filed. And worse, you fail to effectively transition the product into operations, meaning the company never realizes the financial benefits they paid you to create in the first place.
And there is a specific sequence for this transition, heavily emphasized in frameworks like disciplined agile delivery. It's inception, construction, and transition.
Right.
That transition phase means meticulously backing up legacy data, training the end users on the new system, logging the deployment steps, and formally handing off support to the permanent operations team.
And the crucial step, the literal handing over of the keys in your analogy, is obtaining formal, written sign-off from the project sponsor.
Getting that signature.
Exactly. Once that signature is on the page, the project is officially dead and the product is alive in operations. Then, and only then, is celebrating the team's success a mandatory final step. You have to formally recognize the effort to rebuild morale for whatever chaotic initiative comes next.
It is genuinely incredible how structured the chaos actually is. To wrap this all up, project management isn't just a corporate job title for someone who likes spreadsheets. It is a rigorous, deeply adaptable framework for turning abstract, chaotic ideas into concrete reality.
Well said.
By understanding your hidden assumptions, choosing the right methodology for the friction of the real world, and actively managing the complex psychology of the humans involved, you can master literally any endeavor.
I'd like to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Please do.
If operations are just repetitive tasks meant to sustain a system, and a project is a temporary endeavor meant to create something entirely unique, take a hard look at your own personal life. How much of your daily routine is actually a poorly managed project that you've mistakenly allowed become a permanent, exhausting operation? What would happen if you sat down tonight and drafted a formal, rigorous project charter for your next big personal goal?
That is a brilliant reframing. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Our goal is always to make you the most well-informed person in the room. So the next time you see a massive corporate merger go off without a hitch or even a flawless Broadway production, just remember, it isn't magic, it's just a masterclass in managing the backstage chaos. We'll catch you next time.